I just ran the wildest XRP scenario on my calculator, and now I'm picking up my jaw off of the floor. Now, it involves the world's biggest banks and a shockingly high XRP price tag that I almost didn't believe. So yeah, picture this. Central banks like the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan suddenly decide to hold XRP as part of their reserves. It sounds like pure opium, right? I thought so too. Now, I'm an XRP holder myself, and trust me, I've rolled my eyes at plenty of crappy price predictions. But I came across an analysis, exploring the what if the top 10 central banks just put a portion of their $13 trillion in reserves, well, into XRP. Now, by the end of this story, you're going to see why even a tiny slice of government money could send XRP to heights that we've only really joked about in meme chats. And hey, I'm not saying that this will happen tomorrow. In fact, far from it. But the possibility alone, well, it blew my mind enough that I have to share it with all of you. So let me set the stage. As of today, XRP is chilling around $2.81 per coin, with roughly 59.4 billion XRP out there in circulation. So that's a market cap of around $172 billion. It's not too shabby, right? XRP is already one of the largest digital assets around. But in the context of central banks, $172 billion is like a drop in the bucket. These institutions collectively hold trillions, and yes, trillions with a T, at least in assets. So, what happens if they all decide to toss in even just a crumb of that into XRP? Alright, scenario time. Imagine those top 10 central banks. This is including the likes of China, Japan, Switzerland, India, Russia, the US, and others. Put in just 1% of their reserves into XRP. 1% of $13 trillion is about $130 billion. Now, if that much money flowed into XRP, its market cap would balloon from $172 billion to $302 billion. At least if, and this is a big if, which we know isn't true, if the inflows of capital, that 130 billion, is exactly gets added to your market cap. That is not how this works. If we're talking about $130 billion of liquidity, well, liquidity and market cap are two very different things. So actually, if $1 in equals $1 of market cap, then sure, we'd go from 172 billion to over 302 billion. But that's not really how things would work. And of course, that would nearly double XRP's size. And the price per coin, well, would be roughly double what it is today. Let's call it $5.09 by basic math. And it is rather basic. But let me just say that again. It's a simple 1% allocation reserve could pump XRP's price to over $5 on a simple equation, right? That's almost double the price from where we are today, or at least where the price is today. And we're only just getting started with this scenario. Now, let's keep the math at the basic level. $1 in liquidity equals $1 of market cap. It's not right, but it's ultimately the easiest way to explain this scenario. So what about 3% then? Well, now we're talking about $390 billion flowing in. So at that level, XRP could reach approximately $9.50 per coin. Yep, that is almost $10 for one XRP. A 5% allocation, roughly $650 billion from those big banks. Might actually drive XRP to, around $13.80 per coin, officially in the double digits, right? Which is something that XRP holders have fantasized about for many years. So at that point, XRP's market cap would be north of $822 billion, putting it right up there with the giants of the stock world. And we're still not done dreaming yet. Now, brace yourself for the big one. 10% of central bank reserves. That's roughly $1.3 trillion with a T, poured into XRP. Well, by simple kind of arithmetic, XRP's market cap would rocket to at least about $1.47 trillion. And the price, are you ready for it, would be around $22.50 58 cents per coin. Yes, you heard that right, $22 per coin or per XRP. Yeah, give or take a few. Now, for perspective, that's nearly 8 times the current price. Now, I saw that number and I nearly, of course, spat out my coffee, right? I had to double check I didn't accidentally add an extra zero somewhere along the line. But no, the math checked out, at least the basic math, $22 per XRP, just by central banks allocating a modest 10% of their reserves. Now, at this point, I'm kind of sitting there with eyes wide, imagining my portfolio at those kind of prices and thinking, is this real life? I mean, $22 might not sound as crazy as some of the wild $100 or $500 XRP price predictions floating around, but consider how much money it actually represents, right? We're talking trillions of dollars of value. And it's almost surreal to even think that governments, the stodgy old kind of central banks, could directly or indirectly pump XRP to that kind of level. And here is the kicker. Those price points that I rattled off, they're based on straight math, essentially market cap arithmetic. Now, in the real world, it probably wouldn't actually play out like that. Right? See, if institutions of that size started buying, we would likely see a multiplier effect boosting the price even beyond these predictions and projections. Markets, they don't move in straight lines. They overshoot, and when there's excitement at least. So if tomorrow the news hit that say that the US Federal Reserve just bought a chunk of XRP, do you really think that the price would only go to $5 or only to $22 per the math? No, of course not, right? It probably would go way beyond due to hype and FOMO and something called order books. Anyway, even a hint of a big player, a big buyer, could send crypto prices flying. For example, even a $1 billion government purchase announcement could spark a frenzy. Now imagine $130 billion or $1 trillion. The raw numbers say one thing, but human psychology in markets could turn all of those conservative $5 to $22 estimates into much crazier targets. So consider this. If the US government announced that it's buying just $1 billion of XRP, right, crypto Twitter would implode. Now I can practically see the headlines and the rocket emojis alone. Phones would be blowing up with notifications, and my buddy would call me, in a panic kind of / celebration. Did you see that news? He would go, and it would be a kind of pandemonium, right? And that just kind of $1 billion that, so if we're kind of talking hundreds of billion dollars, potentially $1 trillion, the impact would be exponentially larger, right, than, the simple math would suggest. And also, just to bear in mind, right, $1 of liquidity does not equal $1 of market cap. This is just to keep things simple for everybody. Now, it would be like kind of throwing a lit match into a pile of dynamite, right? Market frenzy doesn't even begin to describe it. So by now, you might be thinking, okay, this sounds amazing. Why hasn't it happened? And will it ever happen? And those are excellent questions. So it's time for a reality check, my friend, because this is where our high-flying XRP rocket ship has to face a little bit of gravity. Now, before I go any further here, I need to put on my responsible hat for just a minute. Now, this might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Now, we had to say it. Now we can continue. All right, so is there any chance that these governments will actually hold XRP? Well, let's be real. As of now, the prospect of central banks plowing money into XRP is, well, pretty slim. Speculative is the key word here. Why? Because when we look at what governments and big institutions are doing in crypto, almost all of their focus is on Bitcoin, and sometimes on creating their own digital currencies or stablecoins. With that said, governments are warming up to crypto in general though, more than ever before. Right, for instance, the US, there's been a historic push for crypto legislation. Right, they even passed a new law around stablecoins recently, which is a big deal for crypto legitimacy. And get this, the US government has been mulling over the idea of establishing a national crypto reserve. Basically, government stash of crypto, like a digital Fort Knox. Now, early chatter says that it could hold up to 1 million BTC, which is an insane amount of Bitcoin, and possibly include a diversified stockpile of other cryptos like Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, and yes, even XRP. So when I read that, my jaw dropped again, right? The fact that even XRP is even being mentioned in the same sentence as a national reserve tells you that it's on the radar, at least faintly, in high places. However, and this is a big however, the US hasn't actually greenlit buying any crypto other than Bitcoin yet. They've basically said it's a cool idea, but we're not ready to purchase anything beyond BTC. So while Bitcoin might get the official nod, XRP and friends are still on the sidelines in terms of actual government buying. So what about other countries? Well, places like Russia and China have been talking about crypto too, but mostly in the context of Bitcoin and maybe their own central bank digital currencies. They see Bitcoin and kind of dollar-pegged stablecoins as tools, perhaps to reduce reliance on the United States dollar or to move money outside of traditional channels. XRP hasn't been a big part of their public kind of strategy, as far as we know. Now, their crypto discussions are usually about Bitcoin or how to regulate crypto, not, hey, let's buy a bunch of XRP. So let's look at the scoreboard. Right now, governments around the world collectively hold over 517,000 BTC in their reserves. That's something like $56 billion worth of Bitcoin sitting around government treasuries. And they're not selling it. In fact, the trend seems to be that they like to hoard it. Countries like the US, China, the UK, Ukraine, Bhutan, and even the Kingdom of Bhutan is apparently a Bitcoin whale. El Salvador, of course, and even others, have stacked a serious pile of Bitcoin. Meanwhile, how much XRP do governments hold officially? Well, as far as, public info goes, pretty much zero. XRP and most other altcoins remain in the kind of background of these institutions. So in essence, the big dogs are laser focused on Bitcoin right now. Bitcoin is the shiny digital gold that nations are comfortable with, or at least interested in. Altcoins like XRP haven't really gotten that level of trust or attention yet. So the scenario of central banks suddenly deciding, hey, let's diversify with XRP is, at the moment, a huge long shot. This analysis that we've walked through highlights how massive the impact could be if it did happen, but it truly acknowledges that such government allocations to XRP are highly speculative. So as it stands today, if any coin is going to get that kind of love from governments, Bitcoin is more than likely the candidate. So where does that leave us? Well, for me, this whole thought experiment is a reminder of why I'm in crypto in the first place. It shows how outsized the impact of big institutional adoption could actually be on a coin like XRP. It's like catching a glimpse of an alternate universe where the rules are, well, totally different. Sure, that universe isn't reality today, but it might not be impossible in the future. A few years ago, I'd have said there's no way to a country making Bitcoin legal tender, but now we have El Salvador and others doing exactly that. I would have laughed if you had told me that the US Congress would seriously discuss a crypto reserve or pass a stablecoin law, yet here we are. Things change fast in crypto. Maybe Bitcoin is the main focus for governments right now, but who's to say that in maybe 5 or 10 years, as blockchain tech evolves, an asset like XRP, especially if it becomes integral in global payments, couldn't earn a spot in some central bank vault or hard drive, right? It sounds crazy today, sure, but I've learned never to say never in this space. In the meantime, I'm not holding my breath for 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗱 or Christine Lagarde to announce XRP buying spree, right? If it happens, awesome. You'll see me kind of making a very happy follow-up video. If not, XRP can still moon on its own merits if adoption grows in the private sector. I mean, there are already banks and fintechs using XRP for cross-border transfers, quietly behind the scenes. So, governments aside, XRP's story is far from over. Personally, I'm walking through this scenario with a kind of wild ride, or at least it has been a bit of a wild ride, because I started out super kind of skeptical. I'm like, come on, central banks and XRP in the same sentence? But after running the numbers, I kind of caught myself feeling a spark of optimism, even if it's just a fantasy right now. It's a heck of a motivational fantasy. It's just it makes me, I guess, appreciate the bag of XRP that I do hold. And it reminds me to think big and to stay grounded, right? Hope for the best, but prepare for the usual, right? Now, the other thing here that's probably worth noting is that we've just used a really basic equation. $1 liquidity in adds $1 to market cap. However, if you actually do your own research, you'll come across a multiplier effect. $1 coming in can represent upwards of $500 to market cap. Now, the multiplier is something that depends on the order books I mentioned earlier briefly. So basically, liquidity is your buyers and your sellers, right? So if you have a significant amount of dollars coming in, right, that's your buying side, and an insignificant amount of selling pressure coming in from the other side, then the price has to go higher, significantly higher. So you have seen, and it has been documented, that $1 in can represent upwards of $500 to market cap. Now, if you go right back to the very beginning where we're saying add another $130 billion coming in with a 1-to-1 ratio, imagine $130 billion coming in on a 500-to-1 ratio. And that is one of the true things here when it comes to the crypto market space, or crypto space as a whole. The market cap is rather misleading. It doesn't represent actual value. It doesn't represent liquidity. It just represents a theoretical idea of value. And it's actually quite misleading for retail investors who don't fully understand and grasp the concept of it. So just be really cautious with understanding and maybe just thinking that $1 in equals $1 to market cap, because this is how you get those parabolic moves. It's how XRP went from mere pennies in 2017 to over $3 in just a few months. It was the imbalance between the supply and the demand, i.e. the inflows versus the outflows, and we saw a dramatic move to the upside. So just bear that in mind. Oh, and one more thing. If you've enjoyed kind of exploring all these kind of what if scenarios and, have enjoyed maybe geeking out about crypto in general, then I highly recommend joining our free educational Discord server. The link is in the description below. It's basically a bunch of us crypto enthusiasts hanging out, sharing insights, debating the news, and yes, occasionally daydreaming about the moonshot scenarios like this, right? It's free. It's fun, and you might actually learn a thing or two, or even teach us something. So why don't you hop in and say hi? Also, here's a quick shout out to one of the tools that I use. Now, I do a lot of my trading on the Blowfin crypto exchange these days, right? I like their interface, and I've had a good experience with it so far. So if you're looking for a new platform to buy or trade crypto, then you can check out the Blowfin link, right? I have an affiliate link that is in the description down below, which means that if you do sign up and trade and use it, it supports the channel here. You've got to keep the lights on, right? But there's no pressure, of course. I only mention it because some of you have asked me where I trade, and I want to be transparent about the link that is down in the description and how it helps out this channel here. All right, so let's wind down. What is the big takeaway with this here? Well, even though the idea of governments pumping XRP is mostly fantasy right now, it shows how even a little adoption at that level could actually send ripples pun very much intended, through the entire market. Now, it's a reminder that in crypto, the line between reality and imagination can blur faster than we can expect. Today's long shot could be tomorrow's headline, or not, right? We don't know for sure, but it sure is interesting to imagine, and it keeps me excited about what the future might actually hold. So if you've enjoyed this little adventure, hit that subscribe button and join me for the next crypto journey, and I will catch you all in the next one.